Good morning and welcome to online worship with Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church. Our service today is titled, No Justice, No Peace, Black Lives Matter. We will be listening to the voices of Black Americans and people of faith on the ground in Minneapolis. I am the Reverend Dr. Suzanne Trilligator. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the minister of this church. Thank you for joining us. Newcomers are welcome here. Use the chat box to say hello and feel free to stay for our virtual coffee hour when everyone will have a chance to talk and get to know each other better. Today is the second to last Sunday of the regular church year. Next week is Flower Communion, and I encourage you to bring or wear flowers on that day. And watch your email for news about our plans for summer Sunday gatherings. Both online and in person, our church is a caring spiritual community where we value all world religions and ethical systems, and where we strive to live according to our 7 principles. You can learn about those principles and about our church at our website, melroseuu.org. Our first UU principle calls us to affirm the worth and dignity of every human being. And so we know that no one deserves to die over a fake $20 bill, a broken taillight, a toy gun, or contraband cigarettes. And yet that's exactly what happened to George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, and Eric Garner, who were all killed by police over minor offenses executed without any legal process. And then there's Ahmaud Arbery and Trayvon Martin, murdered not by police, but by white extremists acting with impunity. There are literally hundreds of these cases. They are evidence of a corrupt system that we cannot ignore, we cannot turn away from. That desire to turn away, the ability to turn away, is in fact a white privilege. People with darker skin do not have that choice. They live in fear of white violence every day, and it erodes their health and well-being. Today, we will not turn away. For this hour, we will listen with open hearts to our siblings who are asking us to hear them and meet them where they are. Remember, when we say Black Lives Matter, it does not mean that white lives or non-Black lives do not. It is not an either-or situation. Black Lives Matter means there is a crisis that we need to address. When someone wears a pink ribbon to raise awareness about breast cancer, you don't ask, well, what about colon cancer? Why are you discriminating against those people? When someone else's house is on fire, you don't ask the firefighters, what about my house? Come and pour water on my house. When we say Black Lives Matter, we mean we see that there is a crisis. We see that your house is on fire, and we are bringing our hoses and our buckets and our caring. We will do what it takes to help you now and into the future. And we will shout from the rooftops, stop setting fires. Stop killing people. Because my life and my becoming depend on yours. The only way any of us gets truly free is if all of us get free. Last Monday, our church leadership decided to put up Black Lives Matter signs at our church. You can see photos in your email and on the website. Today at 2 p.m., many of us are participating in the Stand Out for Racial Equity in Melrose and in the online Boston Black Memorial. I emailed you yesterday and this morning with details about both of those events. After worship today, our coffee hour will be shorter, just 10 minutes, so we can take a quick break after that and return together at this link for a half-hour all-congregation discussion about racism and our church's response to it. Please plan to join in with us. If you find today's service inspiring, you can donate through our website. If your donation is part of your annual pledge, please be sure to use PayPal's note area to write in the word pledge. This month, half of our collection plate will go to Green Roots, a community organization that works to improve both public health and the urban environment in Chelsea, a nearby city that has been especially hard hit by COVID-19. Our introit this morning is from Leah Morris, an independent composer and musician who often works with UU churches. James, please share our introit.
keep your heart wide open, though the waves wanna push you around. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. I'm gonna keep my heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open. Though these waves wanna push, though they want me around, though the waves wanna push me around, I'm gonna keep my heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open till my faith brings me back to solid ground. Until my faith brings me back to solid ground. We gotta keep our heart. We gotta keep wide open. We gotta keep our hearts wide open. Though these waves wanna put us around, though these waves wanna push us around, we gotta keep our heart. We gotta keep wide open till our faith brings us back to solid ground. Till our faith brings us back to solid ground. Say hi.
Hi.
I call us to worship this morning with an excerpt from the famous 1935 poem by Langston Hughes. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. America, oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith, and it is lit to begin worship in churches around the world. As I light our chalice, we will hear a reading from Garen Boyd, the chair of our anti-racism ministry team. Garen.
I'll light my chalice as well. Good morning, everyone. Our reading today is called One Piece of the Deeply Sacred Whole by Nancy MacDonald Ladd. When we say save the rainforest, we don't mean that we cease to honor the mighty cedar or the reaching pines. We mean that one particular piece of a deeply sacred whole is more at risk than others, and that this risk, this threat, is worthy of our very bravest actions. So it is with Black lives in this country, and the message that Black Lives Matter is important so long as the nation effectively functions as if they do not.
Both our opening hymn and our closing hymn today are performed beautifully by Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout, the Director of Worship and Music at First UU Congregation of Ann Arbor.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release. Circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
And now, in place of our usual covenants, I invite you to join with me in this unison reading from Carrie McDonald, our UUA Executive Vice President. James will share the words on your screen. Love is hard. Love for people, especially those who are different from you. Love that says, I see you as a person. Love that says, let your unique light shine in the world, because each of our souls touches the divine mystery. Love that says, we're on a journey together, and my fate is tied up with yours. Love that grabs you and won't let you go until your whole life is dedicated to siding with love. Love that changes the world. Love is hard. Do it anyway. For our story today, we are sharing a video from Lauren Wyeth, the religious educator at First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, which is very near some tragic events of the last 2 weeks. Last Sunday, Lauren gave this direct, honest, and loving talk to the children of her church about George Floyd and what people are protesting about. Yesterday, Katie, our DRE, sent the video out to parents so that they could preview it. Please share the video, James.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Wyeth, and I want to talk to our kids this morning about what's happening here in Minneapolis. As Unitarian Universalists, we promise to speak the truth in love. And sometimes the truth we have to speak about is very sad or very complicated or scary or unfair. But we speak the truth in love anyway, because the truth will set us free. We are talking this morning about George Floyd. George was a 46-year-old Black man who lived in our city. His friends called him Big Floyd because he was 6.5 feet tall, really tall. And when George was a boy, he liked playing football and basketball. All through his life, George tried to help others by being a good and generous friend and by accepting others just as they were. On Monday, George Floyd was killed by a white police officer in South Minneapolis. The police officer was arresting George because he thought that George had used fake money in a store. George was made to lie on the ground, face down, with handcuffs. And then the police officer knelt down and put his knee on George's neck. And George told the police that he couldn't breathe. Some people who were nearby tried to get the police officer to stop hurting him, but the other police officers who were there, they didn't help. Even worse, they prevented anyone else from helping. And the police officer who was pressing his knee into George's neck, he didn't stop, and George Floyd died. Why would the police do this? In our country, so many Black people have been killed by police officers. We're taught that police are supposed to help and protect everyone, but Black people have always been treated unfairly by police. They're more likely to be accused of things they didn't do and more likely to be hurt. This is really scary because police officers have a lot of power and responsibility. Though we should all be able to count on them to be kind and helpful, many Black people feel scared when they're around. Black leaders in our community are calling for an end to policing. They want money to be given to Black communities directly so that people can choose how they will take care of one another. Now, here in the Twin Cities, in this past week, you may have seen broken glass and smoke and heard sirens and loud bangs and helicopters around your neighborhood. You may have seen some beautiful art, like this mural, and I know you've seen lots of people helping one another too. Our neighborhoods are hurting. We are full of so many feelings about George's death, including deep sadness and fear and rage. Ever since George died, lots of people have been protesting what happened. We carry signs and we demand that the police officers who murdered George Floyd be arrested, all 4 of them. But many people think it will take more than that for things to change. We want to live in communities where when someone needs assistance, for any reason, no matter who they are, they can count on trained helpers showing up with kindness and concern. Black community leaders are demanding that the Minneapolis police become a force that cares about and protects everyone equally. They say we might have to start over with a brand new way so that Black people and Indigenous and Brown people too can trust community helpers to help everyone. Now, an important question we have is how can we honor George's life? Well, first we can remember and talk about him like we are now. We might want to find a picture of him and post it somewhere in our home. I chose this beautiful one by Andres Guzman. When we want to create sacred space, we can light a candle for George and for his family and loved ones and for all our communities. We can say a prayer of hope that George's loved ones find comfort and that our communities find justice. God of many names, we know that breath is life. May everyone breathe freely. We feel our connection to the whole human family as we breathe in and breathe out. Amen. And we can also do things to help. We can draw pictures or write messages of love to share with George's family and our neighbors. We can make signs that say justice for George, or we can write Black Lives Matter in chalk on our sidewalks. We can write letters to our mayor and our governor telling them about the kind of communities we want to live in. What happened to George Floyd and what keeps happening to Black communities in our city and our whole country is terrible and wrong. Whenever you have any questions about it, you can speak to us, and we promise to speak the truth in love. Knowing hard things is still easier than having questions that we can't ask or feelings that we can't express. If you're angry, it's okay to stomp around and yell. And if you are sad, crying might help. And kids, if you're feeling scared, I hope you will let your grown-ups know so they can help you feel calmer. And I promise you this, we adults will work as hard as we can to fix these problems by taking care of ourselves, by taking care of you, by keeping our hearts open even when they're broken, by lifting up the voices of our wise Black leaders and listening for what love is asking us to do. We love you so much, and our love for you is why we are so determined to build a better world.
Let's take a breath in together. Every week we take time out for prayer and meditation, for each of us to connect once more with our conscience and our compassion. As we enter into this time of centering, I ask you to take your hands away from your keyboards, put them in your lap or wherever is most comfortable, and settle into your chair. Breathe. We start this time of centering with our centering song. Then we sit together in silence for a few moments, and then we share our ritual of joys and sorrows. Let us now enter into the quiet time with this centering song, which is also from the composer and singer Leah Morris.
I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My ears are wide open. My eyes are now open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I to me. I'm listening. I am listening. In this moment of Spirit speaks through me. I can hear the voices of all my kids. I'm listening, singing. I am listening, the sweet spirit howling into the wind. My ears are wide open, the joy. My eyes are wide open, the love to see what you have for you and me. Oh, I'm listening in this moment of silence. I am listening. I hear Spirit speak through me.
And now let us sit together for 2 minutes in silence. Every Sunday, we share with one another our joys and sorrows, the personal milestones of our lives. We share the joys that they might uplift all. We share the sorrows so that we might carry them all together as one community. I invite you now, if there is a joy or a sorrow on your heart, to type it into the chat space. Start your message with the word candle so that Michelle can see them clearly. She will read these using first names only while I light a candle for each one.
Good morning. Our first candle is from Laura and Allison. A candle of sorrow for George Floyd and all the others. From Cleo and Steve, a candle of joy for our grandson Clay, who turned 2 yesterday. From Garen, a candle of speedy recovery to my stepmother Millie, who had heart valve replacement surgery on Friday and is now at home recovering. From Martha, a candle of concern for my good friend Margaret, who is starting a new treatment this week for multiple myeloma, while also recovering from a broken leg. I believe this is from Adrian, a candle of concern for my brother Terry, who was rushed to the hospital again last night. From Anne, a candle of hope that this may be a turning point for love, and a candle for our daughter Olivia and Matt, who are supposed to be married next Saturday. From Wendy, a candle of gratitude for the people of my elementary school who devoted our staff meeting to discuss institutional racism. From Brian, a candle of remembrance for Bob Hughes, who died last week at the age of 81. From Mary H., a candle of concern for family members. From Richard, Marie, and Liz, a candle of joy. We are celebrating the birth of our new granddaughter, Ellie. Sometime this morning, Ellie and her mom, Katie, are doing well. From Adrienne, a candle in peace for my coworker, Kara, and her 3 children who lost their husband and father suddenly this week from a heart attack. From Carol Nestor, a candle for her youngest grandchild graduating from high school today. His sister graduated from college last week. From Karen G., a candle of concern for my dear friend Terry, who is experiencing severe back pain. From William, a candle of sorrow for Breonna Taylor's missed 27th birthday. From Carol FV, a candle for our country. And then Reverend Suzanne, if you'll light one more candle for all the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken. Thank you.
Let us hold in our hearts all the joys and sorrows we heard and felt this morning. And let us act with compassion toward one another, ourselves, and our world in the coming week. Another deep breath, please. Thank you. In this extraordinary national moment, I spent hours thinking about what to share with you today, what message most needed to be spoken and heard during our sacred time together. After prayer and reflection, I decided to forego not just my sermon time, but also the reading, the prayer, and the offertory music today, to make space in our time to share with you the following extraordinary sermon, preached by the Reverend Karen Hutt last Sunday at First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. The sermon is 17 minutes in length, which is longer than I usually preach, and it contains some descriptions of violence. So I ask parents of young children to use their discretion. The sermon was preached on Zoom and recorded on Zoom, and so the video is not perfect technically. And if you find that distracting, I invite you to close your eyes and keep listening. When Reverend Hutt says no justice, no peace, that means we cannot and should not expect a return to normal anytime soon. Normal is profoundly broken. Without justice, meaning actual structural change, there can be no peace. At the end, Reverend Hutt names our UU tendency to comfort ourselves with hopeful visions of some imagined future time of justice. She asks us to let go of that escapist kind of hope and engage in real action instead. To that end, I've added to the homepage of our website a list of many ways you can take concrete action today, from the safety of your home to learn and to act for justice. In addition, Reverend Hutt asked those who use her video to donate to local efforts. So I made a personal donation of $250, the amount we would pay to a guest minister for their sermon, to Violence in Boston, Inc., a grassroots organization that supports Black lives. I invite you to join me in giving. Now, as you listen to Reverend Hutt, try to be aware of your body. Where do you feel a reaction rising in yourself? What is it telling you? What is your faith calling you to do in this moment? Please, James, share the video. Reverend Karen Hutt.
My name is Karen Hutt. I am a minister with First Universalist, and I have never been so proud to be a UU. It's been 25 years this year for me in ministry, and I am grateful to be with all of you. I was born with a heart defect. Doctors were uncertain if they could do such a risky surgery, and a very costly surgery on this little colored girl in 1959. They debated, my parents challenged the hospital, and 2 years later, my life was saved through the surgery. But following my surgery, it was in a largely African-American hospital. They moved that procedure out of the city, making it really inaccessible for Black families. There's no justice. There's no peace. When I was a kid, my great-grandfather, who was born just after the Emancipation Proclamation, told me about his mother who had been enslaved. His mom was a seamstress who freed herself. She needed work, and she got a job sewing Confederate flags during the Civil War. She used the money to buy her relatives out of slavery. Her husband, though, we learned very little about, was murdered by white children for fun. The story goes that they took out his eyeballs for marbles. There is no justice. There is no peace. When I was a kid, my grandfather told me about how proud he was to be a soldier during World War I. He loved the uniform because the women in France thought that he was just the most handsome Negro ever. When he and his best friends came home from the war to Delaware, Maryland area, they were chased by a gang of white men. They caught my Pup-Pup's friend and lynched him. The Pup-Pup hid in some debris until it was safe to escape. At the lynching, hundreds of white adults and children took pictures with his friend's charred body, smiling. And then chunks of his body was distributed to the many that sought them to put in what was called a nigger jar. There was no justice. There was no peace. When I was a teenager, I was a popular, mischievous, smart aleck kid who took lots of risks with the boys. We sat on the chains between the subway cars in Philadelphia, sitting on them while the train was moving 80 miles an hour underground. We jumped on the back of public city buses and held onto the ledge to ride to the next stop. We asked adults to buy us Boone's Farm apple wine at the state store. And the cops would always come on these incidents, and I couldn't run very fast, so I always hid underneath the cars. All the boys were eventually arrested or beaten, at least once by the police in their early years, and many, many, many went to juvie. There is no justice. There is no peace. When I was a young adult, I took a boat to work on an island in the Boston Harbor with Black and white kids from South Boston High School. We were teaching them leadership skills using the ropes course and environmental science as a metaphor so that they could go back into their school during the height of racial violence during the busing crisis in Boston in the early 80s. One day, I had to take the late boat back to Dorchester Bay and walk a mile to the Red Line train station. On the way, I was jumped by a gang of whites. I was left semi-conscious on the ground after a brief but painful encounter. There's no justice, and there's no peace. When I was 30, in my 30s, I moved to Chicago, the most segregated city in America. One day I was driving and was pulled over by the police. One day I was driving and pulled over by the police. One day I was driving and pulled over by the police, but a matter of 15 times in 1 year. I was ticketed, harassed, disrespected. There's no justice. There's no peace. When I was in my 40s, I worked at a maximum security prison with thousands of Black men piled like sardines, 7 floors high. I watched guards step on the heads of these men and then drag them down concrete staircases in races on either side of the tier for entertainment. There was no justice and there was no peace. Now, in my 60s, I see my country much the way I see this so-called president, both behaving like insolent children, a ravenous toddler, unable and uninterested in controlling or mitigating raw, historical, racist impulses to conquer and destroy Black life. These eruptions against our humanity can happen at any time and at any place because anti-Blackness and white supremacy are the bedrock of this nation. The slightest tremor can shake the ground beneath our feet, and then that foot of gleeful control steps on our collective necks. This country who hears my pain as white noise, who sees my blood as inconvenient puddles to step over. This country has weathered my Black body with stress and illness. This country whose structures and machinery of injustice continue to create new ways to separate my head from my body. You see, America loves our Black bodies. To throw a ball on a field, to dunk a hoop, to labor in the industries of capital, for sexual fantasies, and the provision of entertainment. But our Black heads, not so much. Our heads that create Black towns after slavery, our heads that innovate and invent, our heads that do complex math, our heads that write novels, our heads who create music and smile and joke with generativity despite the terror. Our heads that have figured out how to survive and how to take care of ourselves, our dignified heads that are held high, and most of all, our heads that speak truth to power. For the American anti-Black movement, it is that head of George Floyd, his head with kinky hair, his head with a broad African nose, his head with beautiful full lips, his head with dark brown skin. It is that head that the anti-Black agenda seeks to sever from its body. So white supremacy can feed. You must cut off that head so it can feed on him like zombies feed on brains. The killer cop that kneeled on George Floyd's neck lingered with childish glee. Look at his face. And he's lingering with institutional sanction, thinking that this was okay, that this was acceptable to do. He looks bewildered at all the fuss as he casually keeps his hand in his pocket, just passing the time on a Black man's neck. After all, George was not human. You could not hear the pleas of a non-human. You could not respond to the life being sucked out of a non-human. You can kill him to obliterate breathing Blackness, speaking Blackness, thinking Blackness. The machine of white supremacy is so well oiled not to see or to hear or to feel. It is a cold and calculating gadget with one singular laser-focused objective: to kill me in the most comprehensive and thorough manner. Slowly through policy and infrastructure, or suddenly through the deprivation of oxygen. This machine, with its intricate screws ground into my ancestral body, this machine that has robbed Black people of our liberty and who profited by this theft every hour that we live, have no moral ground on which to stand. It is the humiliated, incarcerated, mutilated, and terrorized Black body that serves as the vestibule for this democratic republic. I love this country. And all my life, I have heard that it's going to take time for America to change. I believed it, and I worked for it. But I have a message to my own childish aspirations today from the Me Too movement. And that message is, time's up. How much time does it take to see us as human? How much time does it take for our pleas to be heard? You know, there's a great relief in saying time's up. It means that something else is going to happen. It means the end of something. It means, now what? What it doesn't mean is hope for something better. It means actions for something better. We are witnessing a shocking accumulation of injured and mutilated Black bodies, particularly young Black bodies. Our Unitarian, Universalist, liberal, and progressive white communities need to ask themselves this question. If our movement is truly progressing towards this, quote, society that is to come, maybe, if we're really moving towards that, why is suffering increasing at such an alarming rate? In response to this inquiry, are you telling your Black siblings that they remain hopeful? Keep struggling? Keep hope alive? Keep faith? I have come to the conclusion that hope is a deadly aspiration for Black people. When we hope, we are still. Hope is a naive conundrum that doesn't inspire action. Being hopeful comes from a place of lack and scarcity. Hope causes us to wait for things to happen to us rather than going out and creating those things for ourselves. While we hope, we continue to suffer. America depends on Black people to wait and hope and pray so white supremacy can continue maintaining and adding to our suffering. My great-grandfather hoped, and he and my family taught that during the uprisings, taught me during the uprisings in 1968, that the political arithmetic of this country wants us to hope while it's saturated with violence. It was founded on looting in the Boston Harbor. It looted the land of the native folks. It looted the shores of Africa that brought me here. It looted the environment. It looted Black communities from their wealth. Thus, nonviolence is a misnomer or somewhat of a ruse. Hope is a Black sacrifice. It is a violence directed towards the self, and it is useless. Political hope has usurped the spiritual principle of hope and puts it in the service of extending oppression. The political hope is bound up with metaphysical violence. And this violence masquerades as a solution to the problem of anti-Blackness. This hopeful, temporal, linear perfection is connected to the tropes of betterment, struggle, work, and utopian multicultural futures. These conceptual instruments of political hope will never obliviate Black suffering or anti-Black violence. These concepts only serve to reproduce the conditions that render our existence unbearable. Political theologians and optimists avoid the immediacy of Black suffering, the horror of anti-Black pulverization, and paint pictures of the, quote, not yet, but is, maybe to come soon, maybe the social order will be, political hope becomes a vicious and abusive cycle of struggle. It's like putting a circle around an idea or an object. The idea might be Black freedom. It might be reparations. It might be justice or relief or reprieve or redress or equality. Putting a circle around it and then making it inaccessible because it doesn't really exist. Those with political hope propose a collective enjoyment as an answer to Black suffering. They point to finding the joy in the struggle, the victory in the toil, and the satisfaction of symbolic action and the singing of songs from enslavement. How repulsive is it that in our very own hymnal, there is a song, No More Auction Block for Me, white UUs singing about toil and struggle as Black youth are slaughtered daily. Black bodies are incarcerated as forms of capital. Black infant mortality rates are soaring, and hunger is disabling the bodies, minds, and spirits of desperate Black youth. These conditions are deep problems, and singing spirituals does not address the terrifying fact that the world depends on Black death to sustain white life. They depended on my ancestors' death, but I'm here to say time's up again. I'm here to say it for Richard Johnson, my great-grandfather, who said at the end of slavery was just a coffee break. And he went on to create numerous Black businesses, employed much of his community in good jobs. Time's up for Walter Grooms, my pop-up, who, like other Black soldiers, was a war runner across the battlefield who took messages from one battalion to another across explosive areas. He came home to be a union organizer at the Navy Yard. Time's up for Shirley Grooms, my mother, a social worker, and George Hutt, my father, an engineer and politician, who risked everything. They risked everything walking me one day across a racial barrier to enroll me into an all-white school that had the resources they believed I need for my education. My ancestors did not hope and wait. They acted and organized. Friends, go down and try for a day to see what it's like to let go of political hope. Just let it go. Imagine the creation of a spiritual, human, life-centered, life-giving hope that's rooted in the reality of the world we have now, not the one we dream of. Imagine the creation of a spiritual, human, life-centered, life-giving hope that will be built with the Black and white ashes that have been left on Lake Street. Imagine. Blessed be. Amen and Ashe.
And now our closing hymn today. It's again from Dr. Rideout from the 2016 UUA General Assembly. He introduced the hymn by explaining that it was written from the Black faith tradition, so it contains some theology that is not exactly UU. He asked us to refrain from colonizing the song by changing the words. He asked us rather to open ourselves to the spirit in which it is offered. Now, the song is, I Need You to Survive. Join in as he invites you to.
I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need Listen. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to. Let's sing together. I pray, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with the words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love, I love, I love, I need, I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. You pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with the words. Sing it with me.
I need you to survive. I need Americans of every color to survive. Our lives and our salvation and our freedom is all bound up together. Oh, America, let America be America again, the land that never has yet been. Love is hard. Love that changes the world is hard. Do it anyway. Amen.